Welcome, everyone. Today, we're diving into a really powerful framework for classroom management, progressive discipline. This explainer is based on work compiled by Oscar Ali Shamoon, a continuous professional learning and improvement catalyst at the Teacher and Staff Development Center in Gilgit-Baltistan, Pakistan. We're going to tackle a core idea. What happens when we treat discipline not as punishment, but as a genuine teaching opportunity? It sounds like a small change, but believe me, the results can be huge.
So let's start with this big question, because it really gets right to the heart of what we're talking about today. What if discipline wasn't about punishment, but about learning? For generations, classroom discipline has kind of been all about consequences, right? But what if we've been missing the point all along? What if every single one of those tough moments is actually a golden opportunity to teach? That's the powerful, game-changing idea we're going to unpack right now.
Okay, so before we can really build up this better model, we first have to take a hard look at the cracks in the old one. So let's start there. Let's look at why the traditional punishment-first approach is, well, frankly, just not working for a lot of our students.
And when you look at the research, it's actually pretty startlingly clear. Just relying on purely punitive measures, things like suspension, it doesn't just fail to work. It can actually do real, lasting harm. We're talking about a clear link to higher dropout rates and, believe it or not, even future trouble with the law. But here's the fundamental flaw. The real kicker. Punishment tells a student exactly what not to do, right? But it completely fails to teach them what they should do instead. It's like only giving half the equation for learning and expecting them to solve the whole problem. It just doesn't add up.
So, if that old model is so broken, what's the alternative? Where do we go from here? Well, this brings us to a much smarter and way more effective structure. Let's talk about the progressive model.
All right, this definition right here is absolutely key, so let's unpack it. Progressive discipline is a staged, predictable sequence of responses to misbehavior that moves from least intrusive actions to stronger consequences, pairing sanctions with support and teaching. Now, the big takeaway here is that progressive discipline isn't about being soft. Not at all. It's about being strategic. It's a predictable sequence of steps so everyone, teachers, students, parents, knows exactly what to expect. And the most important part, you see it right there. It pairs consequences with support and teaching. It's not just about stopping the bad behavior. It's about actively building up the good behavior. Now, for a system like this to actually work, it has to be built on a really solid foundation of core principles. Things like clarity, so everyone knows the expectations from day one, and being least to most intrusive, which just means we always start with the smallest possible correction first. We don't bring a sledgehammer to a thumbtack problem. But the two real game changers here are that relentless focus on teaching new behaviors and whenever possible on repairing the harm that was done. That's how we break the punitive cycle and actually get into a real learning cycle.
Okay, so the philosophy makes sense, right? But what does this actually look like in a real classroom, moment to moment, day to day? Let's get practical. Let's break down the 5 levels of this model, starting with prevention and moving all the way to intervention.
The whole system works kind of like a ladder. It's really simple. You always start on the lowest rung, which is prevention, and you only climb to the next level if the behavior continues. What's so great about this structure is that it gives a super clear, predictable path for both teachers and students. There are no surprises. So let's walk through each of these 5 levels one by one.
All right, level 0. Now listen up, because this is hands down the most important level of them all. Seriously, this is where you win the game before it even begins. Level 0 is all about being proactive. It's about having those crystal clear routines, building strong, positive relationships with your students, and planning engaging lessons that hook them in. Think of it this way. A well-built ship doesn't have to worry so much about a few small leaks. When this foundation is solid, most of the problems you're worried about, they just never even start.
Okay, but what if a minor misbehavior does happen? That's when we move to level 1. And the goal here is simple. A quick, quiet course correction that doesn't disrupt the whole class. Now look at the language in this example script. You can finish that at the table or take 2 minutes to refocus at your desk. Which will you choose? See what's happening there? It's not a command, it's a choice. And that is absolutely key. It respectfully gives the student agency. It puts them back in the driver's seat while gently redirecting them back to the task. It's a beautiful, simple way to handle things with minimal disruption.
So, what happens when those gentle reminders, those level 1 responses, don't quite do the trick? Well then, we move up the ladder to level 2,
structured interventions. At this stage, we introduce a small, logical consequence. Maybe it's a brief timeout in the classroom with a reflection sheet to fill out, or maybe a quick note or call home to a parent. But here's the critical part, and I can't stress this enough. It is always paired with teach-in. We don't just give the consequence and walk away. We take a moment to help the student understand what went wrong and what a better choice would look like next time. It's that consequence plus teaching combo that makes all the difference.
Now, if a behavior becomes a persistent pattern, that's our cue to move to level 3. At this point, the issue is clearly more serious, so our response has to become more formal. We're now documenting everything carefully and bringing in more support. This could look like creating a formal behavioral contract with the student, bringing in a school counselor for targeted interventions, or maybe even holding a restorative conference. The goal of a restorative conference is really powerful. It's to help the student truly understand the impact their actions have had on others. We're really digging in to get to the root of the issue here.
And finally, we have level 4. This is the last resort. We only get here when there are serious safety risks involved. This level includes measures like in-school or out-of-school suspension. Now, because all the research is so clear on the potential harm of removing a student from their learning environment, this step is never, ever taken lightly. And critically, it is never the end of the story. An exclusion from school is always paired with a clear, supportive plan for that student's successful re-entry into the classroom. The goal is always to bring them back and help them succeed.
Okay, so the theory is powerful and the 5 levels are super clear. But let's be real. How does a school actually put all of this into practice? How do you turn these great ideas into a campus-wide reality that everyone understands and uses? Let's talk about that.
All right, let's just tackle the biggest misconception right now head on. Because a lot of people hear words like progressive or restorative, and they immediately think it means no accountability. That is just plain wrong. This slide says it all perfectly. The question isn't, does this mean no punishment? The answer is, it means proportionate consequences. This isn't about eliminating consequences. It's about making sure they are fair, they make sense, and most importantly, that they are a learning opportunity. Accountability is absolutely central to this entire model. So how you make this real in your school? Well, it starts with a few really high-impact practical tools. First, give every single teacher a simple one-page flowchart of the levels. That way, the path from level 0 to level 4 is always crystal clear. Second, make your staff training hands-on. Do role-playing, practice those crucial level 1 scripts until they become second nature. And maybe most importantly, you have to track the data. Relentlessly, you have to monitor it to make sure the system is being applied fairly and effectively for every single student in your building.
So after all of this, what's the one big idea you should walk away with? It's this. Progressive discipline is not a choice between being supportive and being firm. It's the bridge that connects them. It's a practical system that holds students accountable while actively teaching them how to be better. It's the best of both worlds. And that brings us to our final slide. I really want to leave you with a question to chew on. Whether you're a teacher, an administrator, or even a parent listening in, I want you to think about this. Based on everything we've just discussed, what is the one thing, maybe just one small change, that you could make starting tomorrow to shift the focus of discipline in your world just a little bit more towards learning? What's that one step you can take?